Welcome back to the program. I am sitting here chatting with my good friend Matt from Too Many Records. Excellent channel here on YouTube, all about vinyl. You got to check it out if you haven't already. But today, we're doing something a little more laid back. We're just going to talk about collecting and just see where this episode goes. The reason we're talking about collecting is because you're going through a bit of a, what would you call that?
I feel like purge is aggressive. I don't want to say purge. That makes it seem like there's going to be some attacking, some
bodily fluid, maybe?
Some fluids. No fluids at all, unless it's cleaning fluids.
Gotcha.
This is going to be more of a culling of my collection.
Okay.
Because I've been thinking a lot about the ethos of collecting and kind of like what inspires me to collect, what inspired my collection up to this point. And I decided that I wanted to do a cool event for the people that watch my channel and the people in LA that, you know, collect records. And I wanted to sell about half my collection. I love all the records I bought. I bought them all for a reason, but I started thinking about and dissecting why I purchased those records and what I look for in a collection and what I want my collection to be.
It's funny. I mean, I immediately I started thinking about when I did that myself before I moved to LA. I cut about my collection in half. I really thought about, okay, why do I have this? Do I really want this? And it was at a time when, you know, no one was collecting and it was so cheap. And so like parents of my friends would just give me their records because they were clearing them out or whatever. Like, oh yeah, that weird friend of yours likes these here.
That's true. You've been doing vinyl rewind since before the resurgence. So you jumped on the bandwagon well before, you know, vinyl wasn't hot until maybe 2013 again. Kind of like, that's what you're saying. It was super inexpensive, which that's a whole nother subject to talk about. Talking about how the price of vinyl has just continuously skyrocketed over the past 3 or 4 years.
So the resurgence has been interesting because it's not just like resurgence of collectability, like it's trendy to buy a collector car. There was a finite amount of cars from the 50s or 60s or 70s, but with vinyl now, it's hard to keep track of all the new pressings and the repressings and the remasters and the new vinyl and the new colored vinyl, and it's like
it's crazy.
You can't collect it all.
What's crazy to me is that there are so many pressings from like that are classic pressings from like the 60s, 70s that you think would be just insanely valuable. Like if they're a first pressing. A modern record that came out that has a limited edition of 100 could be worth 5-6 times the price of like an original press of like an awesome 60s album.
Well, we were in Amoeba yesterday and you pointed out this $1,200 soundtrack or something.
The Pearl Jam 20 limited edition glow in the dark promo.
Yeah, it was like, what, $1,200?
It's $1,250.
$1,250 for how many records is that? 2, 3?
3 discs, I believe.
Wow.
But it glows in the dark, you know?
Yeah, probably doesn't sound that good.
Probably sounds like total trash. But it was given to people that worked on the film, and like there's a good story behind that. So that one actually makes sense to me. Like the price point's a little high, of course, but 100 copies of Pearl Jam, which of course Pearl Jam is one of the most rabid fan bases, along with, you know, Fish, Grateful Dead. Like these fan bases are like crazy about their bands. Yeah. So Pearl Jam has that fan base, and then this is one of the most limited items you can get in the Pearl Jam like vinyl canon, probably the most limited. That makes sense. But you were talking about how you don't like the artificial scarcity of certain records because like, oh, let's make a press that's this color and all of a sudden this is going to sell out and this is going to be worth X money in the aftermarket. If you're an artist, you put out, it's almost like second nature now, put out a limited version of your record no matter what it is. It's a way to guarantee sales, really. It's a smart business tactic for the label and the artist. When I was looking at my collection, which, you know, I'm sitting at about 2,000. I've been saying that for a while, so it could be plus or minus 500 at this point. But yeah, I'm looking to sell at my event. I'm going to sell about 1,000 to 1,200 records. You know, my collection is all killer, no filler in the sense that there's not going to be boxes of classical or like, you know, stuff that like you see at a thrift store. It's going to be all like things I purchased for a reason. And I purchased a lot of those because of FOMO, which you and I were talking about just before we started shooting this. You know, that's a huge element in collector culture where it's like, this goes up and, you know, let's say this is only available for 24 hours and then it's gone. Like,
well, that's kind of the reason I bought that Dan Mason.
It's a great record.
Because it was like, well, it's going to be cheaper if I buy it now.
Right.
But of course, it didn't sell out right away.
But once it does, wait 3 months, it's going to be $90 on Discogs. But let's talk about Blonde, Frank Ocean, right? So Frank Ocean put out Blonde on...
That's so frustrating.
I remember sitting at my mother's house, sitting there on Black Friday, and I saw it pop up for sale, and the album just come out, and I was like, I didn't love it as much as Channel Orange. And then I saw that it was $50 before shipping, and I was like, I'm not going to pay $50 for this record. And they said it's only available 24 hours just on Black Friday. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pass. You cannot find that record for under $300 now. Like, you can't.
Well,
it doesn't sell for below that.
And it's hard to even find it.
It's on Amoeba's wall for, I think, $750, which, first of all, I don't understand how that'll never sell. But Discogs, you're looking $300-$400.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, the fear of FOMO. It's like when you see a record that you're interested in, even if you're not 100% ready to pull the trigger on it, there's that little thing that like kind of gets you where you're like, if I don't do it now, what if I never get it? Or what if like I never will get it for a price even close to this?
Something like Blonde, it really is because you don't have to buy that to hear it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it really is just, it's more of an art piece than it really is. It's a collector piece. It's not really meant to be played at that point. But the other thing I wanted to bring up too is records in general went from like a product commodity that people would have to buy in order to listen to then becoming purely a collector market.
Right. It's been so fetishized in that way. I mean, that's literally the only way to put it, because so many records are just digitally sourced, or they're not from original tapes. And
right.
I'd say the vast majority of releases that come out these days are not sourced from original tape. So people that have collections, they're doing it for collecting them, not for listening.
So here's where I stand on that. Like, if it my cutoff is the 90s. That's when most bands started transitioning from analog to digital recording. So it's like, if it was recorded digitally, like, I'm okay with the pressing sounding that way. Especially like a late 90s pressing. Sure. Where it bothers me is when they Friday Music is a company that does a lot of these. They have a huge back catalog, right? So they'll dump a lot of like stuff from the 80s and 70s, and they'll just press it on 180 grams, and it's usually like, what is it? It's CD sourced. Sure. And it's a random color to try to upsell it. But
that probably works.
But like, these are pressings that no one's asking for represses of. They were made at the time when people were still buying records, so there's a gazillion copies of these different records.
What's interesting, you were talking about these albums that came out in the 90s, and like, whatever the sourcing might be from that might be a little sketchy. And that's interesting because that's such a weird period of time, because let's talk Stone Temple Pilots. Purple, amazing record. The definitive version of that came out in like 2012. It's the MOV pressing, because the original pressing sounds terrible. It doesn't sound good, and the purple version from MOV sounds amazing. So that is a case where it became better over time. Mm-hmm. But that's rare. I feel like that's just that's that era specifically. Everything else you're going to want to go with the original.
I have a 1967 pressing of Love, Forever Changes, and it's beat up. It's warped.
Of course.
But I have it because that to me is like the original, even though there's millions of copies of that. But to me, that's special. It survived. Mm-hmm. But the one I play is the repressing. But this to me is another reason I like to kind of collect something like this. Is beat up. I paid $10 for it. Look at this tells a story too of like who owned it. Like, someone put in an anarchy and then like tried to black it back out. Like, was it a little brother that did that, or like their stupid friend? There's two things that people are collecting. One is like the way it sounds, and the other is the way it looks. Right.
And it's nice when they intersect.
But so I think that ties back into the colored vinyl and the uber limited edition, or the Vinyl Me Please edition. It's literally the same record. It's just got an alternate color, which I'm okay with. Exclusive pressings for like records, like independent record stores, like Amoeba has some of those. Like, that's great because that gets people to go to the store.
Sure.
Arguably, who knows? Like, there's that whole thing of colored vinyl, splattered vinyl, split vinyl versus black vinyl.
Like, okay, so glow in the dark sounds the worst. It's like every glow in the dark record I've ever heard has a hiss that you can't get rid of. It's just they don't sound good. They're total novelty. But there's a lot of arguments within the vinyl world of if black really sounds better. A lot of people say that clear sounds better because that's the original color of the material before they color it. And
well, my understanding is they add carbon black. That's why it's black, and it's a hardening agent, so it makes the record more durable. So therefore, after like 10 plays, that clear vinyl may not sound as good as the black vinyl after 10 plays.
I would subscribe to that. But then again, it comes to something else we talked about, which is like diminishing returns. And most people, let's say your average person setup, are you really going to tell the difference between a red splatter vinyl or a black vinyl? Like, is it gonna? It really comes down to the mastering.
And of course, there's the whole issue of like, as the stamper presses, it gets less and less detail. So, you know, there's that dude in Thousand Oaks who sells $300 white albums because they're hot stampers.
When it comes to collecting, and this is the collector in me, like, I know a lot of people, like I said, black is like, that is it. They go with that, and that is like what they look for no matter what. I know people that get upset when there's not a standard black pressing, and it's just there's only a colored variant. For me, if a artist I like releases a record and there's a colored variant, 100% of the time I'm gonna go for it. Because
Sure.
I look at vinyl like art also. I love when the disc matches the cover art. That makes for a beautiful picture. It looks great while it's spinning. I love that aspect of it, and that is kind of a step away from the pure audiophile experience, of course. But for me, vinyl is so multi-sensory that it's just, I need that little extra oomph to like really kind of keep drawing me in.
Yeah.
I feel like if all my records were black, I'd be less interested in it almost. You know?
Sure.
I like that. I sometimes I'll forget what a record was. Like if I got it 4 years ago, I pull it out. Oh my God, I forgot this was this color.
I'm just from a different time where like colored vinyl really was the exception, not the rule. And so it doesn't necessarily have the same enticement, although I do get caught up in the FOMO of like, oh, you know, I should get that loser edition of 7 by Beach House because I can. I'm on the ground floor. It's gonna go up in value.
Sure.
You know. But am I ever gonna sell it? Probably not. You know. So it's like
that's a whole nother subject. It's the concept of vinyl as an investment, which everyone does to an extent because of how voracious the aftermarket is. Whether or not you take advantage of it, it's something that people think about. When they buy a colored pressing, a limited pressing, if it's limited to 200, you're like, all right, I'm paying 25 for this. I bet you this will be worth 60 in a year. And it's like, that's not something you're going to necessarily sell for 60.
No.
But it's just interesting to think, oh, my collection's now valued more. If you wanted to sell your whole collection, having these kind of limited one-off, random, kind of unique pressings will change that drastically with the aftermarket. Like I said, Blonde. Imagine you bought that for $50. That's a $300 record now. That's a huge... How do you not think about that as a human, you know?
Well, we were at Amoeba and we're looking at that M83, $45 for literally the same record, looks the same from the front.
Mm-hmm. It's just colored discs.
But would you pay the $45 for that, or would you just...
No, because I paid $25 when it was out.
Okay, well, forget, like, to me, I would just go with the regular edition because I don't value the color that much more to make me want to spend that. You know, I don't put that much value into the color of it. If I get it for the same price, sure, I don't care.
That's the difference between you and I in terms of like the collector's mentality. Because of Montreal's Hissing Fauna, Are You the Destroyers, in my top 5 albums of all time. And I own black pressing of it. I own a Newberry blue pressing. I own a red and yellow pressing. I have a picture disc of it. I only listen to the black pressing, but I have them all because that album's super important to me. And I feel like I own every iteration of it, because I love that album.
Well, I would do that with the blue album.
But you don't have the blue one yet.
No. I don't need another MoFi pressing of it. I would get the original UK pressing or like a Japanese pressing.
Sure.
Or something that was different.
The disc is not different enough. It needs to be different and more than that. It needs to be like a label or like a cover or like an edition, like an Obi strip or something. Is that like what?
See, and this is where I run into like me collecting for the show, where I have 6 versions of Sgt. Pepper's. I don't need all those, but I use them as like baseline. Okay, so how does this pressing change over time? They're important for me to get an understanding, because that's a very important record.
And the thing that I'm struggling with in my collection is because of this FOMO, I've ended up with a lot of records that either I've grown out of or that I bought that I don't need on vinyl. Like you're saying, I don't need it personally. I either won't listen to it front to back, which I think is a really good to hold yourself to when it comes to vinyl. Like, do I love every track on this album? Because vinyl's meant to be played front to back. You can pick a track out, but ultimately listen to it on Spotify or YouTube if you want to just hear a track. You want albums in your collection that are all killer, no filler, as I said before. So what's interesting for me is that line between the albums that are good and I like owning, but do I need to own them? Would someone else find it, better in their collection? Would they appreciate it more? And some of this stuff is out of print and I bought it because of like, oh, I want it, but I'm like, I don't need it. The part of me that struggles with that is that I love collecting things. I've always been into collecting things. I used to collect video games. As a kid, I collected little turtle figurines. That was clearly very cool. And now I collect vinyl and I love hunting for it. I love owning it. Like, even if I don't listen to it, like if I have a really rare record that I love that record and it's sealed, it means something to me. But that's not necessarily what I want my collection to be about moving forward. I feel like I'm at a point now where space is a limit, time is a limit, and I want to find that balance of having an amazing collection that represents my tastes of all of my favorite albums, or just oddities or things that are like one-offs. Like I have some of the records from like Romanus or like Phono Flow. I respect vinyl for having the ability to do like wax mage style like craziness. So that's something I want to keep too as the collector. But I don't need a copy of Blonde because I don't love that album as much as Channel Orange, and I don't even want it for 50. You know, if I saw it for 25, which will never happen, I would get it.
Sure.
But it becomes a point where it's like you have to kind of balance everything.
Now it's just you selling?
It's just going to be me selling at the events, and it's going to be my stock because it's a celebration of a lot of the records I've talked about on my channel over the past 4 years. And like people have been like, "Oh, that's a cool. I remember you talking about that. Now I want to buy it." And I was telling you, I wanted to you know take these funds I get and put it back into the channel, and you know try to travel and explore the other cool record stores. The reason it's a festival is that I'm doing a multiple tier kind of rollout where the festival's 11 to 5 Saturday. At night, we're going to do a bar crawl for anyone that wants to hang out more in North Hollywood after. And then, because that area is really good to walk around. There's a lot of good bars.
Yeah, the NoHo area.
Exactly. And then when Sunday, when everybody, you know, if they're hungover, gets over their hangover, whatever it may be, we're going to go to Amoeba and I'll do like a meetup there where, you know, if people want to
Fantastic.
And do a little more digging with me who goes there all the time. The event's going to be in Los Angeles at the Federal in North Hollywood. It's going to be from 11 to 5 on March 9th. It's a Saturday. So if you're in LA or if you can get to LA, definitely come by because Geek's going to be there too. And we're going to do a live podcast there. He's going to be on the panel. More info about that as it gets closer. But it's going to be really great. And there's going to be bands performing. You have the album Leaf, Fort Vine, Tiny Stills, amazing musicians. And just a great place. They have great drinks, great food. And you'll have a chance to do a really unique record sale that doesn't, you know, sales like this don't really exist. I feel like a lot of sales are full of stuff that's beat up or like, you know, things you see over and over again. This is some pretty uncommon stuff that you're going to stumble across for pricing that I'm trying to price to move, like very fair.
I mean, I like to think of it as you're bringing your living room to the people. And they can just literally go through your personal collection that's for sale, which is like pretty incredible because like we all have a really, like you have a really highly curated collection. Me, some of my stuff, it's questionable. Like, I don't know, geek. That's maybe $1. But there's also some good stuff. But it's also a lot of it. Some of it's beat up. Some of it's like I bought it for a placeholder, and I'm gonna like upgrade it down the road.
Sure.
Or like I have 2 copies of Love. One's beat up, one's not.
Yeah.
Same things. But for you, it's totally not that case. Like you don't even have to worry about like looking at condition.
Yeah, and you know, it's a cool celebration. My channel is pretty much a 4-year mark right now, so it's like I think this month is the 4-year mark. So it's a celebration of that. If you haven't checked out the channel, please give it a shot.
There'll be a card in the corner.
Yeah, and
real easy.
Yeah, and there's a Facebook group and an event about my event. It's called TMR Fest. There'll probably be a link somewhere to check that out too. If you're interested in the event, just, you know, join the group and join the event and say you're interested or you're going, because the more people that are going, the more excited I'm getting. So I think it's going to be pretty awesome.
This is going to be a fantastic event. I'm so excited for it. Hope y'all can make it if you're in the area. And if not, be sure to join the Facebook page because that is where you're going to be dropping the records that don't sell. They're going to be going there first. So just head to that page. Be sure to be clued in on that if you can't make it. But, I'm very excited. So thank you so much for coming by the pad.
Always good to be here. I didn't suit up this time.
No, you look great.
I still felt like I was at home.
Thank you all so much for watching. I'm your Vinyl Geek.
I'm Too Many Records.
And we'll catch you
on the flip side.